What's up, you guys? This is Rob from Gay Guy Plays, and today on the Daily Grind, we're going to be taking a look at Zephyr's rework. First and foremost, I'm going to hit you guys with a little bit of a build and explain exactly why I've modded her the way that I've modded her. After that, we're going to be taking a look at each of her individual abilities and exactly what they've done now after they've been refreshed. Then towards the very end, we're going to take a look at some gameplay, and I'm going to give you guys a little bit of the feedback that I think Zephyr could definitely use to be tweaked a bit further, because you know what? She's almost there. She's like about 10 minutes out. She's like about down the street and around the corner. She's making her way to the party, but she's not quite there yet. She's great, but she's making her way in. Now, as for the build, aside from the standard efficiency and survivability mods, you can actually see that I have pretty much focused on duration and range. Now, one of the things that I actually think was very, very interesting about this is I actually cut a little bit of the duration. I actually had an even longer duration on her abilities, and that's mainly because of the fact that I wanted to keep Turbulence going, as that was kind of like her key ability. However, now, because of the fact that I'm using Tailwind a lot more, I've actually had to cut back a little bit from the original duration, because duration does make your Tailwind fly further, and to be honest with you, it almost makes it fly a little too far. So I went ahead and tossed that duration mod, and I've actually slotted in a little bit of natural talent. Natural talent helps with the charge up of her ability for Tailwind, so she can kind of like jump up and hover, and then it also kind of cuts down on the new animation for Turbulence, because I don't know if it's just me, but that's a new animation, right? That doesn't look like the same animation that we used to have. But aside from that, I've pretty much kind of given up all on power strength, mainly because I really don't feel like she needs it. One of the things that I do really want to note is I know that there are some people out there that are absolutely in love with Jetstream. I personally don't use it, mainly because of the fact that I hate being super speeded, so it's not something that has found its way into my build. However, I'm sure that there are ways that you could definitely tweak this build out to kind of include that and have a little bit of power strength to boot. Alright, so let's go ahead and start off with her first ability, Tailwind. Now, this is actually combined in properties of her old second, which was Dive Bomb. So, as you can see here, as you hold down one, this will actually propel her into the air, and she'll begin to hover. At this point, she can go ahead and fly around and dash around, or come back down into a Dive Bomb kind of state. So, she's got both the hover, and then she's also got the Dive Bomb mixed into it. However, I do have to say, you have to be pointing fairly well down for it, otherwise you're going to go skidding along the map. However, if you just want to go ahead and attack the straight, and let me mark the ground real quick, it'll actually just propel you forward. Now, the reason that I marked the ground is because legit, she can go a long way, which is absolutely fantastic in the plains. However, in smaller corridors, might hurt a little bit. So as you can see, for those of you guys who don't know, this map is about 100 meters out, and you can see that she easily cleared that with the build that I've currently got going. So we're looking about 100 meters and beyond. So it's a ways away. Now you can probably see why I actually took out one of the duration mods from this ability, because I do find myself using Tailwind a decent bit more now, especially when I'm out in the plains. However, 100 meters per shot can be a little bit much, especially when you're in tighter corridors, so keep that in mind. Now, one thing that I do want to point out here is while you're actually in flight, Tailwind costs a lot less to cast, which I think is absolutely amazing. With my current build, it's about 3 or 4 energy per jump. And I think that's absolutely amazing, especially if you're going out in the plains, because literally you can just propel yourself for insanely long distances, and I think that's an amazing addition to her first ability, and really kind of gives her some nice quality of life when it comes to the plains. Moving along to her second ability, we have Zephyr's Airburst. Now, if I'm going to be completely honest with you, this is not something I was very excited about. I kind of read exactly what it did, and I was a little bit like, is it really all that great? However, the more that I played her, if I'm going to be completely honest with you, I kind of was like, oh, I see exactly why they added it into her kit. Now, as you can see here, it actually does multiple instances of damage. The first one when passing through an enemy, and the second one when exploding. So it'll actually make contact with terrain and do a little bit of bonus damage there, or actually just a second instance of damage. I don't necessarily want to call it bonus damage. Now, the reason that I actually really like this ability was because I found myself out in the plains, and you know, you're firing enemies, yada yada yada. Then all of a sudden you've got a melee enemy that comes up on you, And the really cool thing about it is that you can just kind of launch it at that melee enemy and have them basically knocked on their butts, which I found really, really hilarious. And I actually found it to be a nice utility to your kit. Is it like my dream ability for her? Is this like the ability of all abilities? I'm like, oh my god, it's so great. I don't think so, but I can definitely see where DE was going when they kind of went with this. So as you notice, it'll pass through enemies, and when it collides with terrain, that's when it explodes. And when it explodes, it'll actually deal that second instance of damage. The other thing that I wanted to go ahead and show you is, as you can see, we've got some tornadoes going on over there, and if you toss an air burst at it, it'll actually make the tornadoes grow in height. Why not with? We'll get into that when it comes to the feedback. Okay, so Zephyr's third ability is Turbulence, and this one has pretty much remained unchanged, except I do really need to ask you guys, is this a new animation? I really feel like that's a different animation, or am I crazy? Because I feel like it's very similar to the original one, but not quite the same. There's something very different with it. Now, the cool thing about this one is, of course, it reflects projectiles, it reflects bullets, even hit scan bullets, it reflects rockets, so that's all fine and dandy. The only thing you do need to kind of be worried about is any flamethrowers. Now, lasers are completely fine and dandy. You can cope with those very, very easily. However, for some reason, flamethrowers just don't seem to act like other beam weapons, because as you can see here, we can go ahead and grab a MOA real fast, and legitimately, for some reason, those lasers don't hit, but flamethrowers definitely do. So I don't know if that's a difference. Maybe it's because it's an AoE and this one is more targeted, but as you can see here, it'll actually handle lasers quite readily. Nothing's changed about this ability, which I'm like, hallelujah, except maybe potentially that animation, I think. Alrighty, so Zephyr's last and final ability is, of course, Tornadoes, and this one got a little bit of an interesting facelift. So the one thing that I wanted to point out about this is it no longer spawns around you unless you point it down. It's actually going to spawn around your cursor. Now, because of the fact that I've got a fairly big range, it's still going to be cast upon the closest enemies within that range. So as you can see, I'm going to not target those guys over there, but I'm going to target those guys over there. And as you can see, we've got tornadoes in this area, but not really over here in that area. Listen, I've got a lot of range, so that's the best I'm going to do. Now also, as you guys know, you can shoot into the tornadoes. Ooh, we've got somebody on my ass. You can shoot into the tornadoes, and all of the damage that you do will actually be transferred to the enemies in there, kind of like Hydroid's Puddle. So as you can see in here, number one, the tornadoes are adopting the elemental damage that I've done the most to it, and it's also distributing the damage out there to the enemies near inside the tornado. I also feel like the enemies within the tornado, if you want to hit them directly, I feel like they swirl a lot slower, which is almost kind of like what they ended up doing with Hydroid's tentacles. Is it almost seems to be a little bit slower, but as you can see right over there, I don't know why they spawned so far from the guy that I kind of targeted it as, but maybe targeting is a little bit wonky in here. But as you can see, it is distributing that damage to all of the enemies inside that tornado. Ooh, that guy hurt. And the other thing that I did want to point out, which I thought was very, very interesting, and I was very glad that they did, was that originally they had stated that they were going to have these tornadoes just follow your reticule. But what it seems like now is that you can actually guide these tornadoes, but only by zooming in. Because I did have an issue with it to begin with, where I was like, well, I don't necessarily want a tornado to follow me on every single target that's out there. But what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go spawn tornadoes right there, and then I'm going to grab a tornado, and as you can see, I'm pointing this way in my reticule. There are no tornadoes coming to me, coming to my aid, nada, zippo, zero. They're all pretty much chilling over there, right? So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to steer this tornado in that general direction. So I'm going to try to get that tornado to go there by aiming. And as you can see, as I'm aiming, that tornado is actually making its way there, as opposed to just following my normal like reticule. It might be, they did state that they wanted to try to make it a little bit slower, but I don't feel like it's following whatsoever. And as I mentioned in the normal 2 ability, you can use the airburst to increase the height of the tornadoes. And airburst can actually go through multiple of them at once, and give an extra height boost, which I think might be a little bit handy for planes. I don't really know. But that's pretty much it for tornadoes. It still provides some decent CC, and now because of the fact that you can steer it, even if it's a slow steering, you can definitely steer a tornado into like choke points, so that way you can kind of take on enemies as they come into rooms or as they come towards you from maybe like a drop ship. Alright, so when it comes to the rework itself, I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm still a little bit lukewarm about it. There's definitely certain things that I like, and there's definitely parts that I'm not so fond of. So let's go ahead and go line by line about the things that I think that they could definitely improve. First off, while I love the new hover mechanic of Tailwind, one of the things I would really love added in, and I understand that it might be too complex, and I don't even know if it's something that they could do because they've literally merged 2 abilities into Tailwind, is if we could go ahead and recast the hover in air, just hold down the button and recharge a hover, not necessarily bringing you up any higher, but just kind of keeping you at the same height that you currently are in order to maintain that kind of like stance, because it's really nice to go up for like a sniper shot and kind of hold yourself there, and then maybe recharge it a bit so that you can get that current amount of boost, not necessarily going any higher or anything like that, because honestly, if we recharge it and it would just go higher and higher, we would literally be going through the roof at some points. So if there was any way to go ahead and include that into Tailwind, I would definitely love that. Another thing that I want to mention about Tailwind is I guess you would say, how forgiving dive bomb is, because currently the way that it kind of works is if you're looking straight down, dive bomb, boom. If you're looking kind of slightly down, you get a dive bomb, boom. If you're looking even a little bit off from that, you go skidding. You literally are just like, boop, and you kind of like are face planting into the ground for a full freaking 100 meters, and it really, it just does, number one, it doesn't look right. Number two, its functionality is a little bit borked in that essence. I was almost wondering if they could just kind of convert it so that instead of causing a dive bomb when you're going straight down or causing a dive bomb when you're at a slight angle, instead, whenever you impact terrain, just create an explosion at that little area. So instead of, making us worry about angles, it's just like anytime you strike an area, instead of maintaining the momentum, you instead just, create a localized explosion for the dive bomb portion of it. I think that would be really handy. Now, I actually wanted to mention the Tailwind Augment, because I'm gonna be honest with you, that Tailwind is really hard to control, and because of the fact that you have a lot of duration with it, and a lot of the times you hold on to the momentum of Tailwind, you'll end up like, if you get a good couple of Tailwinds into it, you'll hit a couple of enemies, and then you'll just kind of like completely keep smushing your face into a wall. So, for those of you guys who don't know what the Tailwind Augment is you do, I believe, 50%, when it's maxed out, like 50% more damage to enemies for each enemy that you hit before you land. Now the thing is, number one, you're usually not fighting too many enemies in the air. You're usually kind of just hovering off of the ground on land, and of course, after your first initial Tailwind, you'll be down on the ground already. Now, I'm gonna be completely honest with you, you can't really stack up that many before you land, because number one, Tailwind is a little bit unwieldy to use, and number two, because of the fact that you can continue to maintain your momentum, and number three, Zephyr has just never really been known as kind of like this offensive frame, so I don't feel like it really makes sense for her to have that kind of ability. She's pretty much utility and defense. That's the way that she works. So I was almost thinking, and this transitions into her next ability, is to go ahead and instead of having it revert back to Dive Bomb Vortex, make it Air Burst Vortex. So for those of you guys who don't know, again, I need to repeat myself, for Airburst, it kind of does that ragdoll outwards. But maybe instead, you could convert it back to Airburst Vortex, and instead of knocking enemies away, it would actually suck enemies into the Airburst. which I think is pretty, you know, gosh darn cool, because number one, you get them sucked in and you deal the damage to them, and that just makes way more sense from a Zephyr standpoint, because even if you're not getting an insane amount of damage for it, at least you're getting enemies clustered, and it helps keep them controlled. Now, as for Air Burst, one of the things that I wanted to kind of point out is, as you guys know, as you guys have seen earlier, I actually have a natural talent into my build. Even with natural talent, I still feel like the animation is a little bit slow. So, I mean, the base animation is probably even slower, and that projectile is painfully slow. So we definitely need some speed up on that. Now, the one thing that I always kind of said for Zephyr, like I was saying, is she's not really a damage-based frame, so usually we're not really looking for damage from Zephyr. So having an additional effect to it, to Air Burst, would definitely be nice. Maybe kind of like an accuracy debuff, maybe an armor debuff, maybe put in like a puncture proc or a slash proc or something along those lines to kind of like give it a little bit of extra utility, because right now it kind of seems like super bland. It kind of seems super bland, kind of like Banshee's Sonic Boom bland, but slower. Now, moving on to Turbulence, don't ever do anything to Turbulence. Never. Turbulence is fine. Just let me know if it's a new animation or if Rob is crazy. That's what I'd like to know. As for Tornadoes, the one thing I did not understand about Tornadoes whatsoever, and I think a lot of people were kind of asking the question about it, was why the Tornadoes with Air Burst got higher instead of wider. Now, regardless, I don't really feel like, number one, I don't really care for the synergy, to be completely honest with you. Like, and for any reason, like, I'm like, okay, so it gets taller, it gets wider, I get it, you suck more enemies in, whatever. But the taller thing, is that for like Darjins in the Plains of Eidolon or something? Is that what that's for? Maybe there's something that's coming with the Venus tile sets that maybe, you know, will be sucking enemies off of the roofs of buildings or something like that, because taller I don't quite get. Maybe taller and wider, give us a little bit of girth, because y'all know that girth counts, okay? Don't completely write off girth. Girth is definitely an important part of the equation here. But yeah, I did not quite get that. And to be completely honest with you, I would love to see if there were any other synergies that you could come up with her kit as well. Like maybe maybe Air Burst causing the Tornadoes to, you know, have 100% proc chance of the element that's currently in them. Maybe something along those lines. Something that just kind of like really makes it feel like you want to use her abilities in synergy, rather than just some people running around with Turbulence and just calling it a day, you know? Give it some extra oomph. Because of the fact that I feel like it's a little bit bland. Maybe with Turbulence on, your air bursts travel even faster and have an even wider range, something along those lines. Or if you're, you know, air bursting from heights, from a specific height, like from your Tailwind, maybe it deals even more damage, or it has a wider radius, something along those lines. Just give Air Burst give Air Burst a little bit of love with some synergy going on there, because it's very baseline at the moment, and her kit kind of ties in, but doesn't necessarily 100. Yeah, it could tie in better. There you go. That's all I'm saying. However, that is pretty much sums up all of my feelings about Zephyr. I really feel like she's about 10 minutes out. She's like real close to the party, and she's ready to come and play. Because I'm actually really enjoying her in the Plains a lot. But then again, previously I was enjoying her in the Plains a lot, so that's really not much to be said. There have just been some quality life of improvements, at least from what I feel, and I feel like there could be more to really kind of push her over to the edge, especially if she's our next prime. I'm just saying. I'm not 100% guaranteeing that, because you know my track record of predicting primes has not been the greatest, but I'm just... Listen, all the pieces fit. Regardless, let me know how you guys feel in the comments below about the feedback I provided, and let me know if you guys have any feedback as well as to what you would like to see Zephyr making her moves on, or maybe you absolutely love her as is. Let me know what you're absolutely loving about the kit as well, because here's the thing. You know what? Sometimes criticism is great, but also a nice pat on the back every now and then for the good stuff that they do is always fantastic. So that's where I'm going to leave it, and as always, love somebody, hurt nobody. and touch your body. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.